The stone walls of Britain's ancient palaces have survived centuries of warfare, political upheaval, and societal transformation, remaining as a permanent symbol of national identity. For generations, the British monarchy was viewed as an immovable bedrock of the state, an institution that stood firmly above the shifting sands of public opinion and the transient nature of modern culture. Millions of people across the globe grew up looking at this ancient house with a sense of awe, believing that the loyalty of the British public to their crown was absolute and unbreakable. Yet behind the magnificent gates of Buckingham Palace and the ceremonial splendor of state occasions, a quiet but profound shift has been taking place across the towns and cities of the United Kingdom. The silent erosion of institutional reverence is no longer just a subject of hushed debate among historians or a talking point for radical activists, but a documented reality that is shaking the very foundation of the realm. A major national turning point has arrived, forcing a historic institution to confront an existential crisis that threatens its future place in a rapidly changing world. To stay informed on how these historic events unfold and to get deeper insights into the changing face of modern institutions, make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow our continuous coverage. Fars News Ascot. The true scale of this societal transformation has recently been laid bare by the most definitive long-term measurement of public sentiment in the country. For more than 3 decades, specialized researchers have meticulously tracked how the citizens of Great Britain view their royal leaders, capturing the emotional highs and lows of a nation's relationship with its hereditary rulers. The latest findings have sent a shockwave through the corridors of power, revealing that public backing for the royal family has plummeted to its lowest level since the early years of the 90s. This is not a temporary dip caused by a passing media cycle or a brief moment of unpopularity, but a deep structural fracture that has been widening at an alarming pace. In the span of just 36 months, a massive portion of the population has fundamentally re-evaluated its loyalty to the concept of a constitutional monarchy. More than half of the nation still holds on to the tradition, but the margin is narrowing to a historic thinness that previous generations of royals would have found unimaginable. The comforting illusion of an eternal, unquestioned consensus has vanished, replaced by an uncomfortable truth that the palace can no longer afford to ignore. Fars News Akoi. To understand how the institution reached this unprecedented low point, one must look back at the dramatic cycles of devotion and disillusionment that have defined the modern era of the House of Windsor. In the early part of the last decade, the monarchy enjoyed a magnificent resurgence in popularity, peaking during the spectacular national celebrations of the late Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee. During those sunny days of national unity, a staggering 80% of the British population expressed active pride and support for their royal heritage, viewing the crown as a symbol of stability and historical continuity. That high watermark felt like an unassailable shield, a grand validation of the palace's role in the 21st century. However, the golden glow of the Jubilee proved impossible to sustain as the decade progressed and a series of deep internal crises began to chip away at that pristine facade. By the time the historic reign of the late Queen came to an end in the autumn of 22, public approval had already receded to 60%, signaling that the departure of the long-serving monarch would mark the end of an era of automatic institutional deference. Blast the radio. The current atmosphere surrounding the royal estates is heavy with the weight of this statistical decline, which directly mirrors the deepening generational divide across the British Isles. The most alarming revelation within the new research is not merely the overall drop in numbers, but the near-total collapse of enthusiasm among the younger demographic. A little over a decade ago, nearly 3/4 of young adults aged 18 to 34 were content to support the continuation of the monarchy, viewing it perhaps as a colourful and harmless part of the national fabric. Today, that youthful support has completely evaporated, leaving a mere third of that same age group willing to defend the crown, while a rapidly growing number openly declare their preference for a completely different form of government. The stark reality is that the institution is increasingly reliant on the fierce loyalty of its older citizens, creating a situation where support for the crown is literally aging out of the population. This generational disconnect forms a dark cloud over the future of the state, as the palace struggles to find a language that resonates with a generation raised on digital transparency and democratic accountability. Ground News Issue 1. The creeping sense of unease is further heightened by the memory of past institutional trials, which long-time observers are now comparing to the current crisis. Many remember the dark days of the early 90s, a period famously described by the late Queen as an exceptionally grim year for her family, when the public collapse of multiple royal marriages and a devastating fire at Windsor Castle pushed public approval down to 69%. At the time, that number was considered a catastrophic low point, an urgent warning that the family had lost touch with the public mood. Yet the current data reveals a reality that is significantly more severe than the crisis of 3 decades ago, proving that the modern challenges facing the House of Windsor are deeper and more systemic than the domestic misfortunes of the past. The palace is no longer just dealing with a string of bad luck or temporary personal scandals, but with a profound reassessment of the utility and fairness of a hereditary system in a modern society. Blast the radio's night falls over the historic palaces of London. The brilliant lights that illuminate the grand facades cannot hide the growing anxiety within their walls. The traditional methods of royal public relations, which relied heavily on grand pageantry and a carefully managed distance from the common public, are facing their ultimate test. The modern public demands a level of transparency and moral clarity that sits uncomfortably with the ancient traditions of a royal court. The latest statistical data is not just a collection of dry figures, but a vibrant map of a nation in the middle of a massive identity crisis, questioning whether the symbols of its imperial past are fit to lead it into an uncertain future. The stage is set for a dramatic confrontation between centuries of tradition and the unstoppable force of societal evolution. A story that will determine the destiny of the British state itself. The modern crisis enveloping the House of Windsor is not merely born from a shift in cultural values, but is heavily fueled by deep, compounding internal fractures that have exposed the vulnerabilities of the royal family to the global public. At the heart of this contemporary drama is an unprecedented sibling estrangement that has effectively split the younger generation of leadership in two. The bitter rift between Prince William, the heir to the throne, and his younger brother, Prince Harry, has evolved from a series of private disagreements into a permanent, highly visible institutional separation. Observers across the globe have watched with a mixture of fascination and dismay as the brothers, once seen as an inseparable duo who would collectively guide the monarchy into the modern era, have completely severed their communication. The depth of this division became painfully obvious to the public during the state funeral of their grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, in the autumn of 22. It is widely alleged by close institutional insiders that the two brothers have not spoken a single word to each other since that solemn occasion, transforming a private family grievance into a structural void at the very center of the nation's ceremonial life. This profound breakdown in communication has left the monarchy looking increasingly isolated and fragile, as the supportive network that once surrounded the future king has dissolved into public recriminations and deep unresolved bitterness, while the emotional distance between the royal brothers has weakened the family's public image. A far more dangerous legal and moral storm erupted in the early months of 26, sending shockwaves through the entire British legal and political establishment. In February of this year, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the younger brother of King Charles and formerly known to the world as Prince Andrew, was formally arrested by law enforcement officials on suspicion of misconduct in public office. This extraordinary event marked the first time in nearly 4 centuries that a senior member of the British royal lineage had been taken into police custody, representing a spectacular and catastrophic fall from grace for an individual who was once a prominent representative of the Crown. The arrest was executed by officers from the Thames Valley Police at a private property on the historic Sandringham estate, following an intense period of renewed scrutiny sparked by the release of millions of pages of documents by the United States Department of Justice. These unsealed records, which detailed the extensive network of the late convicted financier Jeffrey Epstein, contained highly damaging disclosures that forced British authorities to transition from a preliminary assessment into a full-scale criminal investigation. Tank Jowett, Issue 1. The specific legal allegations underpinning this unprecedented criminal inquiry do not focus on personal behavior, but rather on a potential violation of state trust during Andrew's official tenure as a government representative. Investigators are meticulously examining serious allegations that the former prince used his official position as Britain's special envoy for international trade and investment to share confidential government information with Jeffrey Epstein. The released documents appeared to include specific electronic correspondence from 2110, in which official restricted briefs concerning diplomatic trade missions to major Asian economic centers were forwarded directly to the disgraced financier mere minutes after being received by the royal envoy. Under the historical framework of English common law, the offence of misconduct in public office carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment, reflecting the immense gravity with which the justice system views the willful abuse of public responsibilities and the betrayal of institutional trust. Although Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has consistently maintained his absolute innocence and denied any wrongdoing, his brief detention and the subsequent searching of his properties have permanently altered the public's perception of royal immunity, demonstrating to a highly skeptical electorate that the rule of law applies equally to all citizens. Canadian HR reporter Issue 2. The reaction from the top of the state hierarchy to this unfolding legal disaster was swift and uncompromising, highlighting the desperate effort by the palace to protect the broader monarchy from the fallout of the scandal. King Charles III took the extraordinary step of issuing an immediate public statement regarding his brother's arrest, expressing deep concern but explicitly stating that the law must take its course without any interference from the Crown. This direct intervention underscored a radical departure from the traditional palace strategy of quiet containment, signaling that the monarch was fully prepared to cooperate with law enforcement authorities to preserve the integrity of the sovereign office. This institutional distancing was the culmination of a gradual process that had begun years prior, during which Andrew had already been stripped of his official military affiliations, his royal patronages, and the right to use the prestigious style of His Royal Highness. By allowing the criminal justice system to operate openly against a member of his immediate family, King Charles sought to demonstrate accountability. Yet the vivid public imagery of police vehicles operating within the secure boundaries of royal estates has left an indelible mark on the national psyche, fueling the growing sentiment that the institution is deeply troubled. Britannica, Show 1. This atmosphere of ongoing controversy and legal peril provides the essential context for the dramatic drop in public support recorded by the latest statistical research. The comprehensive survey conducted by Ipsos in March of 26 revealed that a mere 27% of the British public now openly state a preference for dismantling the Crown entirely and transitioning to a republican form of government. While this indicates that a clear majority still favours the preservation of the traditional system, the underlying trends reveal a precarious reality where the moral authority of the Crown is being severely questioned. Only 6 in 10 respondents expressed a firm belief that the monarchy continues to play an important constructive role in the future trajectory of Great Britain, while nearly a third of the population actively holds the opposite view. The data paints a picture of a nation deeply divided along generational and cultural lines, where the historical arguments in favour of a hereditary head of state are losing their persuasive power in the face of continuous institutional scandal, and the perceived lack of modern relevance. The complexity of interpreting these historic figures is further compounded by a significant shift in the methodology used by the research organisation to gather its data. Since the summer of 25, the polling firm transitioned from its traditional reliance on quota telephone surveys to a highly advanced online random probability panel, a technical change designed to capture a more accurate and representative cross-section of the modern British public. While the researchers themselves have cautioned that direct comparisons with historical data from previous decades must be made with an element of statistical caution, they also emphasize that the downward trend is too consistent and pronounced to be dismissed as a mere technical anomaly. The shift to a more rigorous methodology has simply brought the underlying reality into sharper focus, exposing a quiet revolution in public thought that has been gathering momentum for years. The traditional pillars of automatic respect and unquestioned loyalty have given way to a culture of strict evaluation, where every member of the royal house is judged not by their ancient titles, but by their contemporary conduct and their value to the modern state. Despite the dark clouds of institutional decline and the heavy toll of family scandals, the future of the British monarchy is not entirely devoid of hope, as individual members of the royal house continue to command substantial personal respect across the nation. The latest findings from the extensive research illustrate a fascinating paradox, where the abstract concept of the monarchy is losing ground. Yet the primary individuals tasked with leading it remain remarkably popular. King Charles III, who ascended the throne during a period of immense cultural transition, has managed to secure the approval of 6 out of every 10 citizens surveyed. This solid majority indicates that the public recognizes his dedication to duty and his efforts to modernize the royal infrastructure while maintaining the core traditions of the state. Even more impressive is the standing of his eldest son and heir, Prince William, who enjoys an extraordinary 71% approval rating across the country. This level of personal satisfaction is something that modern political leaders could only dream of achieving in an era characterized by deep cynicism and partisan division. The high regard for Prince William and his wife, Princess Catherine, suggests that the public still views the future leadership of the family with a sense of optimism, seeing them as a stabilizing force that can carry the nation through turbulent times. However, these personal successes cannot completely hide the structural crisis that threatens the long-term survival of the crown, a crisis that is most clearly visible in the massive generational divide that has opened up over the past decade. The statistical contrast between the older and younger generations of British citizens is nothing short of staggering, presenting the palace with an existential puzzle that will require immense skill to solve. In 2013, support for the monarchy among young people aged 18 to 34 stood at a highly comfortable 74%, demonstrating that the institution was widely accepted across all age groups. Today, that number has collapsed to a mere 33%, meaning that only one-third of the nation's youth actively backs the continuation of the royal tradition. In sharp contrast, the over 55 demographic remains an unassailable fortress of royalist sentiment, with 74% of older citizens declaring their unwavering support for the family. Meanwhile, the middle-aged demographic, those between 35 and 54, occupies a precarious middle ground, with just over half backing the institution. This stark demographic gradient means that as time moves forward, the primary base of royal support is naturally shrinking. While the incoming generations of voters and taxpayers are increasingly indifferent or openly hostile to the concept of a hereditary head of state, this critical situation has been carefully analysed by leading experts in public opinion, who warn that the royal family cannot afford to treat these numbers as a temporary fluctuation. Gideon Skinner, the Senior Director of United Kingdom Political Research at the prestigious polling organisation Ipsos, has noted that this research reveals an ongoing, deeply rooted trend that the palace must address with the utmost urgency. While acknowledging that the personal popularity of the King and the Prince of Wales remains a massive asset, Skinner has emphasised that individual charm is no longer enough to sustain an ancient institution in a modern democracy. The core challenge facing the House of Windsor in the coming years will be to convince a highly skeptical younger generation that a constitutional monarchy still has an important, relevant, and practical role to play in the future of the country. Young people who have grown up in an era of economic hardship, climate anxiety, and shifting social values are looking for institutions that offer tangible utility and moral leadership rather than just historical pageantry and ceremonial tradition. To turn this trend around, the palace will need to redefine its purpose, demonstrating how an ancient crown can actively serve and reflect the values of a diverse 21st century society. The true test of this modern relevance is visible during major national events, such as the annual Trooping the Colours ceremony, which serves as a grand showcase of royal unity and military tradition. On the balcony of Buckingham Palace, the family gathers before thousands of cheering spectators, presenting a pristine image of continuity and strength. King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, and Princess Catherine, alongside their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, stand together as the living symbols of the nation's history. Yet, beneath the surface of this magnificent pageantry, the family is intensely aware that the public watching them is changing rapidly. The biographical trajectories of these key individuals are now intertwined with the survival of the state itself, as each action they take is scrutinized by a public that is no longer willing to offer unconditional loyalty. The transition from the long, revered reign of Queen Elizabeth II to the modern era of King Charles has stripped away much of the automatic mystique that once protected the crown from criticism, forcing the family to earn its place in the hearts of the people every single day. As the nation looks toward the horizon, the British monarchy stands at a historic crossroads, balanced between centuries of unbroken tradition and the unstoppable momentum of social change. The institutions that survive the longest are not those that refuse to alter, but those that possess the capacity to adapt to the changing landscape around them without losing their core identity. The House of Windsor has weathered countless storms throughout its long history, from civil wars and abdications to global conflicts and social revolutions, always finding a way to reshape itself to fit the spirit of the age. The current crisis, highlighted by the lowest public approval ratings in more than 3 decades and a widening generational divide, is perhaps the most complex challenge they have faced in the modern era. It is a quiet, democratic challenge, fought not with weapons but in the hearts and minds of ordinary citizens who are questioning the very nature of their national identity. The decisions made by King Charles and Prince William in the coming years